Hi. Wow. Hello, everyone. That was a wonderful welcome. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. It is thrilling to see all of your faces for this event. We are so excited to have you here. Thank you for joining us. I am Tolu Olubumi, your MC and moderator for this event, and I am thrilled to be here in Microsoft's new office here at One Dog Plaza. Thank you for having us. So I'd like to extend also a special welcome to everyone that's joining us virtually from around the world. Before we start, a quick reminder to our online audience, please share your comments and questions through the Q&A function. Okay, let's get started. Today we will be talking about data and how it can accelerate national digital transformation efforts. It is no secret that the COVID-19 pandemic has exposed the wide digital divide in our world today, and that digitalization is no longer a luxury but a necessity. Over the next hour, you will hear from our expert speakers who have all been longtime advocates for equitable and inclusive digital technologies and are currently at the forefront of making it a reality for developing countries around the world. And we will have a live demo of the Digital Development Compass tool developed by UNDP and GitHub. The team gave me a sneak preview, and it is absolutely brilliant. You absolutely want to be here for this. To open the program, I will now ask Rob up to come up for welcoming remarks. Robert is the Chief Digital Officer of UNDP. UNDP is the United Nations Global Sustainable Development Organization, working across 170 countries globally with more than 17,000 staff. Rob leads the agency's digital transformation and organization-wide effort to harness the power of new technology to improve the lives of those furthest behind. Robert, the floor is yours.
Well, thank you, Tolu, and I prefer Rob anyway, so that's good. And podiums aren't really my style, but I don't really have room to pace here anyway. No, it's my pleasure to welcome you all to this event on accelerating digital transformation through data. We're really excited about this because we have a lot of things to show you with the platform that's been developed, the Digital Development Compass. I wanted just to maybe give you a little bit of an overview of what led to the development of this tool and how it fits in with the work that UNDP is doing. UNDP has identified a vision for the use of digital technology, and that is up here on the screen. It's about creating a world where digital is an empowering force for people and for planet. And this is really guiding a lot of what we do. And of course, at UNDP, we work in a lot of digital solutions. We support our partner governments in all sorts of different kinds of applications of technology, whether it be e-commerce platforms or data systems or healthcare management systems and so on. But increasingly, we're also working with our partners on whole of society digital transformation. Next slide, please? Yes. And so for us, when we look at the issues around what countries are trying to do with digital technologies, it's really about trying to provide support holistically and with people at the center. So the diagram that you see here represents our whole of society digital transformation framework, which has all the components that you might expect would need to be in place to have a flourishing and inclusive digital ecosystem. So whether it's digital literacy among population, regulatory environment, the business ecosystem, and so on. And so this is work that we have started to do with our partner governments. And to kind of support that work, we built a digital readiness assessment tool. And the digital readiness assessment is meant to kind of be the entry point for our work with the government, where we start to look at where are the strengths and weaknesses across a digital ecosystem. It's rapid, it's high level, and it's really meant to be complementary to other approaches as well. Next slide, please. And the way it works, and this gets us to the Digital Development Compass, is that starting with that framework, we then use a perception survey tool, which can be sent out on mobile or on PC, and to a number of respondents, as many as we want. We usually send it out to multiple sectors, so we send it out to not just government staff, but also private sector, civil society, and others. we take the perception survey, and then we'd match that with secondary data available. And when we started to do this, we were doing it in an ad hoc way. And then we realized, as more and more countries started to ask for this, and we're currently working in 30 countries, we actually needed, in any case, to build a platform. And that is actually what has become the Digital Development Compass. And that allows us to then take the data and work with the government on recommendations on how they might address their issues. And so the Digital Development Compass that we're going to present today is really about looking at that framework to give the secondary data view. But what's so exciting about it, and this is what came out of the collaboration with GitHub, and we're so pleased about it, is that the front end is already a very powerful tool, and we look toward evolving that and changing it over time to meet needs. But the back end, which has 189 data sets in it that are now all able to talk to each other, this is the true power. And so we really look forward to seeing how we can work with others and evolve the tool. And if you have an interest that you think that some of this data could be applied to, we'd love to talk to you about how we might partner or collaborate in the future. Now, with that, I'd like to head straight over to our first and our keynote guest speaker. And I'm so delighted that we have with us, joining live from Moldova, His Excellency Iurie Țurcanu, who is the Deputy Prime Minister for Digitalization of Moldova. That His Excellency is able to join us because he has experienced firsthand all of what I just discussed with you, because Moldova was a early pioneer of whole of society digital transformation. And we've really had a lot of, I think, a lot of good collaboration and frankly a lot of fun working with the authorities in Moldova on their digital transformation. So with that, Your Excellency, over to you. You have the floor.
Very much, Robert. Sorry, I cannot switch on my camera because the host doesn't allow me to do that. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Excellent. Okay. Anyway, I cannot switch my camera right now because the host doesn't allow me to do that. But anyway, I'm so delighted to be part of this event today. And it's a great honor for me to address you a message at this launch event of the Digital Development Compass. This analytical tool, which was developed by United Nations Development Program in collaboration with GitHub. And my message is about the digital transformation of my country, but it is also a message of gratitude for the support we receive from these organizations and this very complex process of digital transformation. Today, digitalization is on the national development agenda of every country. Each of us wants our citizens to benefit fully from advantages of modern technologies. We want to have efficient public administrations. We want to have competitive and knowledge-based economy for all our countries. For Moldova, digitalization is not just a way to do things differently. Digital transformation is a national priority and is a fundamental tool in achieving the sustainable development goals and implementing the program for accession to the European Union as a candidate country. As you know, this status Moldova obtained in June this year. Over the last decade, we implemented a digital ecosystem composed of several innovative digital platforms and services. And each of these services solves specific problems of digitalization, such as electronic identity, access control, digital payments, data exchange and interoperability, secure and reliable hosting, and many others. With these platforms in place, it is much easier to develop sectoral services in health, education, taxation, social protection, etc. The digital ecosystems allow us to start the process of fundamental rethinking of public services. The engineering of public services implies a maximum accessibility of those and their citizen centricity. This is very important to all of us, but is a way more important for our diaspora, which is pretty large, that third of Moldovans who live abroad. In fact, through the process of modernizing our services, we are creating a new user experience which keeps the services at a click away. Digital transformation is a complex process and it requires the full involvement of all sectors: governmental, private, university, civil society. The National Digital Transformation Strategy, currently developed by the government with the support of UNDP, will serve us as a tool for aligning all the interested parties to the same strategic objectives and as a catalyst for the country's digital development. The key priorities for an inclusive digital transformation have been designed based on the results of the digital readiness assessment that UNDP conducted in the country earlier, and the Digital Transformation Compact, which was prepared in partnership between UNDP and ITU to outline the main gaps and opportunities for the digital transformation of Moldova. The new strategy includes dimensions such as digital government, digital economy, infrastructure, but the main element of it is people. Digital transformation is not that much about technology as it is about transforming the way people think, the development of new digital skills and habits. And dear colleagues, for a small country like Republic of Moldova, digitalization has always been a challenge. Access to technology, connectivity, growing of digital capacity requires resources, which we don't always have. The challenges of recent years, the COVID-19 pandemic, the energy crisis, inflation, make the digital transformation process even more difficult. The unjust war in Ukraine has generated a humanitarian crisis of great proportions, which is putting our country to unprecedented challenges. Being on the border with Ukraine, Moldova is the first refuge for many Ukrainians fleeing the war. At the same time, in this complicated context, Moldova has become the target of several massive cyber attacks. We resisted, but these attacks made it clear to us that we have an underdeveloped cybersecurity system and that we will need to invest more in our cyber defense capability. As you can see, under these circumstances, the limited resources at our disposal must be redirected to more pressing needs. That is why the support given by the United Nations to our country through UNDP, ITU, and other UN agencies is very much appreciated by our people. We count on your support in implementing the digital reforms, including in the digital transformation strategy, and in the implementation of digital governance framework, a key element in digital development process. It is also a great pleasure to be with our technology partner today. Our government has always been a loyal consumer of Microsoft technologies, and most of our projects are implemented using Azure and GitHub. Moreover, Microsoft helps us explore new technologies and services such as cognitive services, multi-platform app UI, and confidential computing. Thank you for these great products and services. So, Moldova welcomes the appearance of the Digital Development Compass, and we stand ready to actively participate in its testing and continuous development. We are convinced that this tool will help governments evaluate and improve their digital transformation programs, making them more comprehensive and inclusive. Thank you so much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Your Excellency. It is truly inspiring to hear Moldova's experience. Now we're going to move on to another exciting moment in our program, a panel discussion. I'd like to invite our panelists to join me here on the stage. We're thrilled to have each of you. Oh, don't be shy. Just come on. Come on up. I will join you in a moment. So truly exciting to have everyone here today. You're all incredibly impressive, and the work that you're doing is absolutely necessary. And I really, truly can't wait for our audience to hear from you. But before that, some quick introductions on who you have before you. We have Alex Wong. Alex has over 30 years of professional experience in a series of leadership roles that has consistently focused on building partnerships to address the world's biggest development challenges. Since 2019, Alex has been serving as Chief Special Initiatives in the Telecommunication Development Bureau, BDT, at the International Telecommunication Union, ITU. The United Nations, this is the United Nations Specialized Agency for Information and Communication Technologies. In this role, he oversees special BDT-wide programs and projects including GIGA, co-led by UNICEF with the aim to connect every school actually, to the internet. Connect to Recover, which is ensuring countries have robust and resilient ICT infrastructure to support recovery from COVID-19 and other crises. ICODI, the ITU International Center for Digital Innovation, and Partnership to Connect, a global coalition to mobilize action and commitments to achieve universal, meaningful connectivity and national digital transformation. I mean, impressive is an understatement, and I'm already exhausted just reading his bio. I don't want to know what his day-to-day is. Next, we have Yuping Chen. Yuping is the Senior Program Officer in the Office of the Secretary General's Envoy on Technology at the United Nations. There, she works to promote global digital cooperation to achieve the Secretary General's vision of a more open, free, inclusive, and secure digital future for all. She has worked in different parts of the UN Secretariat, including on counterterrorism, drugs and crime, and political affairs. Prior to joining the UN, she was a Singaporean diplomat. Welcome. And our final panelist is Mala Kumar. Mala is a global leader in the tech for social good strategy and design. Using her deep knowledge of the tech and international development industries, Mala created the Tech for Social Good portfolio of programs on the social impact team at the software company GitHub. GitHub has engaged more than 30,000 people globally. The Tech for Social Good programs leverage GitHub's core products, services, and communities to help achieve the SDGs. Welcome, everyone. All right, so let's dive right into this conversation here. Can y'all hear me okay? Perfect. All right, Alex, you're closest to me. Let's start with you. So my first question, over the past year, ITU has put together the Partner to Connect coalition that brings together not just UN entities, but other development partners, so member states, and as well as the private sector. Can you tell us more about the coalition and how it will help member states with scalable approaches to digital transformation?
All right, thank you. That's, by the way, my COVID picture, which I realized I didn't shave when I took it at home, my selfie. Okay, anyways. So Partner to Connect, I don't know if we have any colleagues here from the UN HCR, High Commission for Refugees, but we were so the inspiration for Partner to Connect from my boss, Doreen Bogdan, came from when we saw the Global Refugee Forum, which some of you may be aware of, where the UN played a role using its platform to bring together organizations to make pledges, in this case for refugees. And we thought we need to do one for connectivity. So we began Partner to Connect over a year ago. We engaged over 200 organizations in a multi-stakeholder process with leaders, including UNDP, Malcolm Steiner, Microsoft, Brad Smith, ITC, who are colleagues here from ITC, Pamela Cook-Anderson, working the Office of Tech Envoy. And we felt we needed to create a framework so people could then make pledges against. So if you're really serious about closing the digital divide and digital transformation, make a public pledge. And so the action framework that we developed was then launched in May. And by the time we held our big development conference in June, and now where we sit now, we have over 450 pledges that have been made, valued at over $26 billion in value. Now, money's not coming to ITU or the UN, it's just people making a commitment publicly that they are now going to do X, Y, or Z to help. It could be a government that did it, related to maybe a spectrum policy. It could be a company like Microsoft who pledged that they were going to train 10 million people. So we're going to hold them accountable now. So what's really exciting for us is we've now got all these commitments, and we hope to get many more, where we now want to bring those and match them to our member states in their digital transformation journey, and how can we now help boost and accelerate that country's progress by holding our pledges accountable, but doing it in a collaborative partnership manner. So that's really the key to PDC. We're really excited. We're actually having, I'll do a little commercial, we're having a great event at Twitter headquarters on Sunday, including a rooftop reception afterwards. So if you're interested, let me know. I think it's quite, you have to register and everything, but if you're interested, please come. I mean, Robert will be there, Yuping will be there, usual suspects. So it's super exciting, and we hope you guys all make a pledge. So go on to Partner to Connect. You can read about it, and it'd be great to have you guys involved.
I love it. And you definitely had me at rooftop. I don't know who else kind of heard that and was like, I'm going, I'm joining. Thank you for that so much. Next question, Yuping, if I may turn to you on this. The COVID-19 pandemic and the changes it created in all of the ways, and in all of our ways of working, it really did show the importance of digitalization in so many ways. From the vantage point of the UN Tech Envoy's office, what are the main challenges that you see to slowing down digital transformation in low and middle income countries, including those that are related to data? And what do we need to do essentially to address these challenges?
Thank you so much, Tolu. I think from the perspective of the UN and our office, we see the challenge as consisting of 3 M's. The first M is that of missing, right? What is missing in the world? Alex just talked about the imperative to connect. 2.9 billion people in the world are still unconnected to the internet. So connectivity is missing. When you have people that are left online, these people also don't have access to content. This also means that the content that's out there, if they are not able to access it, or there are other reasons behind the content that is locally relevant or in local languages that could be available, could also be missing. So in terms of connectivity and content, there are missing elements. And then when it comes to data, there are also big pieces of data globally that are missing. And that would be, for instance, data on underserved communities, precisely the people that are left unconnected, information that is necessary for global decision makers, local policy makers to make decisions about digital transformation, basic services in their society, the provision of governmental services, and how to run a society in an inclusive manner. So the idea of what is missing as a result of digital technology or missing data is quite important. Then the other area that is M as well, the next M that we're worried about, is M when it comes to misuse, right? And this refers to the fact that our digital space, as we move more and more online with rapid digitalization that's caused by COVID, we see increased vulnerabilities of people that now live, work, and play online, where there is greater chances of, for instance, online harassment, cyberbullying, increased incidences of cybercrime, and of course, privacy vulnerabilities, as well as the potential of your human rights, human dignities, and freedoms being violated online. So the misuse of digital technologies, and of course, the misuse of personal data is profoundly important. The last M is the question of missed use, not misuse this time, but missed use. And this is the challenge around making sure that we leverage digital technologies for the full benefit of everybody around the world, including, as you mentioned, the lower middle income countries, the people in the underserved communities. So even as we talk about the transformative potential of digital technologies, how data could be the next oil, the next foundation for which we can actually realize new algorithms, AI, digital platforms, are we concerned about how this means, what this means for those that are left behind? And do we really consider the fact that we're not leveraging this fully to make full use of the technologies that are available? So the missed opportunities there, and especially as the United Nations comes now to the realization that the Sustainable Development Goals, which have been the pinnacle of the UN's work in sustainable development, might not be achieved in 2030. How can we better leverage digital technologies and data to achieve the SDGs?
Wow, thank you. Missing, misuse, and misuse. Mala, after Yuping laid this out for us in very clear way of what's missing when it comes to digital transformation, how can the public and private sector best complement each other in supporting a nation's digital transformation? And what role can an organization like yours play in achieving the SDGs?
Great, thank you for the question. My name also starts with M, so that's the first.
I love it.
Yeah.
Alliteration.
I also took my picture during COVID, and I submitted our Partner to Collect pledge, so it all comes full circle. Well, obviously the question you asked is quite loaded, so there's a lot of things that we could be doing at the organization level just in terms of the kind of data that we're releasing, the kind of picture that we create. One of the things that Yuping and I talk about pretty much on a weekly basis is just the fact that it doesn't matter which country you're looking at, low income, middle income, high income. These days, people are communicating on WhatsApp. They're building code on GitHub, right? So there's a huge piece of that comes from the private sector. So if we want to build a more complete data picture, you just can't leave out the private sector and what information they contain at this point, because so many of those interactions and the picture that we're trying to create about digital transformation really comes from those platforms itself. If you look at the targets and indicators of the SDGs and how people interact with the internet, they're quite basic, right? It's usually, did they log into the internet in the last year? And for the longest time, really up until a few years ago, that was almost a proxy for did they use Facebook in the last year, because that was the first interaction. But now as these interactions are becoming more sophisticated, there are different things that our kind of companies can really help the social sector, the UN agencies model when they're trying to build programs or figure out which interventions make sense. I think another thing that we can be doing more of is the kind of work that Mark and Cynthia have done with skills-based volunteering, so I can talk about that more in a second. But basically, the kind of partnerships that we've created to build this digital compass would not have happened without that volunteer support. And we got away, I think, successfully from what a lot of tech companies do, which are hackathons. Hackathons are great, but they do tend to create a lot of technical debt that the UN system just can't really support because they don't have the engineering capacity beyond that event. So we really looked at the pro bono model of consulting, and Cynthia, I think, has done an amazing job of building up the skills-based volunteering program, which sits under Tech for Social Good at GitHub, and looking at how UN agencies can really scope out meaningful work for volunteers that's appropriate for volunteers, because often the kind of ask that we get are, can you build my entire digital infrastructure? And the answer is no. At that point, you need to hire somebody. But finding these kinds of projects that are really meant for volunteer support and can be sustained through volunteer support, I think is a meaningful way forward.
Without a doubt, I think it's so incredibly important, and not just for the organizations that are being helped, but also for the staff morale, the employee engagement aspect of it, and to scale when it comes to all of this work that the social sector is trying to achieve. It's really helpful to have that partnership. Thank you so much for that, Alex. If I could bring you back into this conversation. How important is data to understanding a society's strengths and challenges, particularly with respect to digital inclusion? Also, how can a country make the best use of data to adjust its strategies and approaches in real time?
Right. So as mentioned, I'm with the ITU, and as the UN agency, we're the official collector of ICT statistics from our member states. So we feel, I think, as probably everyone in this room, that without the data, you can't design the interventions you need, you can't conduct the research and where to focus on, so it's essential. And we've been working with Robert and his team because for the ITU, where we focus really on the digital connectivity ecosystem, I think that's the term we're now using, it's much more focused than the whole of society framework that Robert showed earlier, which is why we've been working on how we can make sure these come out as complementary frameworks. We're sort of working on the plumbing to make sure that countries know where they stand. So we have a framework. It actually models our Partner to Connect framework, access, adoption, value creation, where we have data and we're helping countries assess where they sit. So they can then design interventions, or we can work with them, with all of the UN organizations and other partners, to help them focus on the areas that they're already strong so we can move faster, but also where they're weak. And that's where the Partner to Connect comes in. So this idea of using data to kind of plan the assessment is really critical. And in preparing for this, and we love the GitHub stuff because we do stuff with you a lot, we've been trying to also make better sense of our data because we have so much data. So my colleagues who run our data stats team wanted to make sure I shared that we have also launched a data hub, ITU Data Hub. You can search it, beta version. And I think what we're doing here with the Compass is going to be such a great, we need more data. We need to be collecting sources from other just member states. We have a hard time getting data for the member states. We have agreements where member states are supposed to send us the data. But as an example, just something as simple as how many people in your country use the internet, only 53% of the member states actually reply with that information. So our data set's incomplete, and you have to complement it with other data sources. So anyhow, that's, for us, it's fundamental. And so this kind of effort to launch these additional platforms and complementary platforms are really critical.
Thank you. Thank you so much for that. Yuping, the rapid transformation in recent years increases the severity of the consequences of digital inequality, both within and between countries. What are the key risk factors and main mechanism for overcoming barriers and fostering digital inclusion?
So I think that actually goes to the heart of the UN's mission, right? I talked about the Sustainable Development Goals, and the motto behind SDGs is leave no one behind. But I think the more we see digitalization in the world, the more we realize that the divide, the digital divide between the digital haves and the digital have-nots are reaching I think the point where I think the Secretary General has called it a Grand Canyon, an abyss. And these are digital divides that don't just occur when it comes to connectivity, but also when it comes to access and it comes to content creation or the value creation that comes with having access to digital technologies, control over the use of your own data, research applications, knowledge of AI, and so forth. So there are fundamental divisions that are now happening both within societies as well as between countries. We are very privileged. We sit here in the United States, we have access to all these technologies, but when it comes to a middle income or a least developed country in the world, these are not privileges that are enjoyed by the bulk of their population. And so as the world gets more and more digital, these are the people that we left behind. An ITU study, for instance, has found that it is 1 in 4 of the population in the least developed countries in the world that has access to the internet. So if we think about how much digital is going to transform our world, when you realize that so much of the population of the world doesn't even have access to basic connectivity, you realize how much worse global inequalities will be in 15 to 20 years. So at the heart of the whole linking of digital and data to the achievement of the Sustainable Development Goals is this need to foster a sense of equality, equity, and access in the way these types of digital technologies are spread or proliferated around the world. I think this is also the thinking behind what the Secretary General has called for in the Global Digital Compact. And he's called for this as part of a major conference that will be held at the UN in 2024, where the Global Digital Compact is meant to entrench principles for the digital future that we want, which has to be inclusive in nature and precisely address to narrowing digital divides and achieving the SDGs. So I think that the risk is that if we as the privileged few in the community that we now sit in with the luxuries that are available to us don't take note of the fact that digital can be an equalizer and enabler, but also potentially a source of fundamental inequalities in the world, and we don't take action now to address this, it is the risk that we will have to bear and that future generations, particularly in the developing world, will suffer from.
Thank you so much for that insight. Now, it feels like this conversation has gone by so fast because I'm now on my last question to Mala, but it's one of the more exciting questions for me because it's the reason we're here. So GitHub co-developed the Digital Development Compass with UNDP. Can you tell us a bit more about that collaboration? How did it come about? Why did you choose to embark on it? And what does it mean to you and your organization?
Yeah, absolutely. So I know a lot of people in this room because I spent the majority of my career at the UN building tools all around the world. And one of the things that I always had to deal with as a designer was I get 30% of one engineer's time who maybe comes to the country once, and that's like how you build everything. So when I came over to GitHub, I knew right away, and it was actually a direct ask from our then CEO to get more of our engineers engaged with this kind of work. And so we decided to create a skills-based volunteering program that really looks at like kind of pro bono consulting again. And so when UNDP approached us for this project, we jumped on it because it's exactly the kind of collaboration we want. And one of the reasons is because we have, 2 wonderful engineers, Amelia and Matt, who have volunteered an incredible amount of time to build this up. They've done such a great job. And one of the things that I knew coming in that they would bring as a value add is in the UN system, a lot of the data that we deal with is really active, right? So it's based on household surveys. It's a questionnaire that somebody fills out when they go to a health center. A lot of the data that GitHub and pretty much every other private sector company that has, like we do, many, many millions of users is passively driven data. So as somebody told me before, GitHub is not evil, and so we don't collect data we don't need. But in order to make sure that the platform doesn't go down if half of our 93 million users log in at the same time, we do have to collect some data, right? And because our data engineers deal with such a massive amount of data, they have a set of knowledge and just understanding of how to look at passively driven data. Whereas this platform has a mix of active and passive data, they came in with the framework of knowing, okay, the visualizations are not so obvious. We don't know exactly what we're trying to model for, and we don't know how these data sets will be combined. But Amelia and Matt spent a lot of time working with UNDP to really think about what do these sets of visualizations look like? when you have this mix of data. And I think that's something that is a unique value add from the private sector that a lot of UN data specialists may not necessarily have because they're trained for something very different.
Yeah, wow. Well, I'm thrilled that you embarked on this journey and you continue to work on it. It really is such an important piece of work, and I love the way that your organization and UNDP have just collaborated to do this incredible work. With that, I'd like to open it up to our audience, both in the room and online, for questions. For those online, please use the Q&A function to submit your questions. Now, Halem, I left my phone, so so I'm sure you've been sending me questions, and I have no idea what they are. So would you mind sharing the questions with us? Thank you.
Hello? Oh, yeah. I have actually several questions from online audience. So I'll address the first one to Yuping. So it is, what is the role of open source in collaborating and optimizing framework defined in the UN reform? And what would you advise to many organizations that are still held back by the risks of moving their projects to open source?
I laugh because just yesterday, Mala and I were in this very room talking about the value of open source within the United Nations system. And so that is actually a very timely question. I think what has been clear is that there's been a shift in the realization in the United Nations community, institutions, and organizations that open source has to be a technology that we learn how to deal with and to utilize in the performance of the United Nations mandates and systems. That it is, again, sad to say that the UN's a little bit behind when it comes to digital technologies. And so for those in the open source community, this realization comes very slow and very late, but at least we're there. And so there have been, for instance, UN agencies that are really leading the way in the use of open source technologies. The World Health Organization, with the help of GitHub, actually just launched the first ever open source program office in the UN system just earlier this year. There are other specialized agencies like UNDP and UNICEF that are considering how to open their own OSPOs and are already using open source in a lot of their work. There's also been commitment to open source and digital public goods, which would be open source digital solutions, open source data sets, open source AI, at the highest level. It's contained in, for instance, the Secretary General's Roadmap for Digital Cooperation. It is mentioned several times in many of the UN's documents. So there is a sense where at the UN, we are really shifting to thinking about how we can leverage open source more effectively. And the hope is that this really will galvanize a shift in our culture and that we do think that this perhaps is the way to go. In fact, the ethos of open source, the values around open source, collaboration, inclusivity, sustainability, transparency, and a community coming together for the greater good is really similar to the values of the UN itself, and perhaps in some ways go back to the founding of the internet and the original purposes of the internet. So from the perspective of the UN system, it's really a movement that we hope to embrace, and that even though we might be a little bit slower in terms of actually activating it, I think Mala spoke quite eloquently about the systemic challenges that the UN has, because we don't really have that kind of technical capacity yet, but the belief in open source is there, and I think we are at the start of moving towards that.
I will also add, thank you very much, Yuping, for those plugs. Go to socialimpact.github.com/insights. We do a lot of thinking around this work. We've published 2 reports on open source software in the social sector. The last report actually focuses on 4 low and middle income countries and the kind of contrast in the tech ecosystems that built their open source communities. So reach out to our team if you have any questions. We work with half of the UN at this point on open source.
Fantastic. Well, with that first excellent question, do we have others?
Oh, we have quite a few actually, but I'll just maybe ask one more, and maybe someone from the audience has another. So the next question, well, there are 2 questions actually I'll address to Mala. So one is that where are startups and innovators supposed to find funding for disruptive technology? And you mentioned the volunteer networks, of course, but of course they're asking about whether there are funding opportunities for the ideas that they have. So, you know what, I'll leave it at that actually for now.
That's a great question. I mean, obviously, it depends on which country you're coming from. It depends on what you're working on. I think there are more, like the UNICEF Venture Fund, for example, is trying to put in some seed money into startups that are looking at, especially open source and social good work. I will plug GitHub Sponsors, which is a direct mechanism. We have now expanded to quite a few countries in Sub-Saharan Africa and South Asia. So if you're building open source technologies, whether you're an individual or an organization, you can now sign up and get direct contributions, which is actually something that wasn't possible until very recently. But feel free to reach out to our team, and I can do my best to get you connected to some resources.
Thank you, thank you. All right, from our audience in the studio, we have questions? Yes, please. Mike, we have a mic runner. There we go. Over that way. No, she's this way. She's coming. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for the presentations. Just a big question about the data set now that's behind this. Although this is early days, is there anything which is suggesting what works in this question of whole of society digitalization? Are you already see something where there may be a best practice, or if that's not clear, how do you think that may support such a question? The countries are very, very hungry to learn what is the best practice and to see it and to have those lessons. So.
Great question. Alex, I think you should...
No, I think it's on a compass. It's on a compass. Maybe
Yeah, I think Robert actually is the best.
Robert?
Yeah.
Here you go. Join the fun.
Okay, lucky me. I think it is a good question, and we're seeing lots of best practices. I think the data points to where strengths are and potential weaknesses, and that sort of gives you an indicator on where to look. But when then we look underneath that and see best practices, we see all sorts of things. One thing that we're particularly interested in is how countries put together their own digital infrastructure, their digital public infrastructure, those things, those foundational elements of digital architecture that then allow ecosystems to flourish on top. So one of the most cited examples is India's Aadhaar digital identity system, which has a whole set of ecosystems built around it. So we look at issues like that. We also see best practices in terms of governance of digital transformation and how successful digital transformation tends to be led from the highest levels of government with a clear and compelling vision. It's kind of a standard for change management in general, I understand, but in digital transformation, it can't just be led by one ministry. It has to be really sit at the top of government. And then there's best practices around things like inclusion. So how are we intentionally inclusive, meaning how do we intentionally put people at the center of what we do? Because that's why we as UNDP are interested in this, because it has a development impact to it. And we want to make sure that no one is left behind. So it means, for example, considering the specific needs of women, marginalized populations, rural communities, and others, as you're planning your government services that go digital, as you're thinking about how ecosystems are built, as you're thinking about digital literacy across the population. So and we see all sorts of bright lights of examples that get pulled in, whether it's working with the elderly in Ukraine, working with extension into rural areas in Bangladesh, many, many others. So I think the data points to where things are working, and then we need to go in and dig a little deeper about getting those experiences out, which we're doing now.
Excellent, thank you, and thank you for being our impromptu panelist here. I think we might have time for one more question, possibly. All right, great. Can we get one more question from the room? Oh, okay. Who is the closest to a mic? There were a lot of hands that went up all at the same time. There we go.
Thank you so much. So I come from the tech and counterterrorism space, so that prefaces some of my question. One of the things we're seeing with digital transformation is that the digital space also is ripe for abuse to some extent by people who want to exploit it for either kind of political gains or for terrorist recruitment or for other kind of forms of exploitation that lead to kind of real harm in terms of fundamental freedoms and democratic development, etc. You all know this. What can we build on the data in order to help facilitate the transformation in a way that is potentially healthier than what we have seen in digital transformation previously, where we at this point can mitigate some of those risks, building on what exists in the compass? Does the question make sense?
Are you talking more about governments, or are you talking about technology platforms that are
both governments and technology platforms play a role in this, so would be really interested in both those perspectives as well as the UN perspective.
I'll take this, I think, mainly because before I came to the tech portfolio at the UN, I actually worked at counterterrorism, the UN's Office on Counterterrorism. And you're right, this is becoming a perennial issue, right? But it's not just when it comes to counterterrorism. It has to do with human rights in general, and the question about whether governments, in their use of perhaps certain measures, are resorting to technology as a reason or an excuse to do certain things that they're doing. And I think the UN's approach to this has been in terms of looking at best practices, as well as having certain norms and guidelines and rules of the road. There are clear United Nations human rights standards that should apply. And there is a very clear position by the United Nations that human rights exist online as they do offline. So the extent to which we have expectations of governmental behavior in the real world, we should also have those same expectations of how governments should behave in the online world as well. So I think there really is an ongoing dialogue among the parts of the UN that deal with counterterrorism and human rights to make sure that kind of adequate balance is struck, and that when it comes to certain types of activities by governments, there is an appropriate position that's taken by the UN. And we also think that that in general speaks to the need to really talk about how human rights apply in the digital space as well. So in the Global Digital Compact that I mentioned, for instance, there is a very clear call to protect human rights online. And so the implications of this, be it for the counterterrorism space, freedom of expression space, the governance of content, hate speech, and so forth, there really needs to be clear rules of the road and expectations of both governments as well as tech companies. And this is where I think civil society plays a very important part as well. So again, even though we at the UN like to talk about this a lot, I think it's also important that civil society voices are heard in this conversation. I want to add another M to the 3 M's I raised before, and Mala, multi-stakeholderism. And this does mean that besides governments at the table, private sector as well, there also needs to be civil society, parts of society, youth leaders, and so forth that are part of this conversation about the digital future that we want.
I mean, I'll add a comment. I know for our digital transformation wheel that I mentioned briefly, I think it's also in the compass, Robert. I mean, we have cybersecurity as one of the building blocks, so we're measuring it. And we can measure how strong a country is in cybersecurity because there are, UN mandated frameworks and metrics. So that then points to if you're weak, because you can score how well they are, then you need to focus your work on that. And then for the ITU, we do have cybersecurity training and all that incident response training and things like that. So, I mean, that's partially the answer too. So we're measuring that, and I think the compass as well too, right? Yeah.
Yeah, and I can just add quickly from the tech company side. So I'm sure, as you know from your work, it's not really a controversial thing to say that tech is really under-regulated in basically every country in the world, with the exception of the European Union, I think, which has some policies around some of the aspects of cyber terrorism you're probably thinking about. We just don't have that regulatory framework. The good thing is, 10 years ago, a lot of these companies were quite immature, and now as these, all of these big tech companies are becoming these major corporations, alongside with Microsoft, which has been around for a long time, it's actually really common to find our kinds of teams, like Tech for Social Good, Social Impact, and policy teams that are trying to engage meaningfully on these issues. So you're seeing more people with my kind of background coming into these tech companies, and it's not going over their head and they're thinking this has nothing to do with them. So I am optimistic for just that kind of public-private partnership, and I do think it's really important to get more people from the UN system into these major tech companies because it can change the way that these companies think about these issues. So for what it's worth, let's keep collaborating.
Collaboration is key. Thank you, thank you. And with that last question, we'll conclude the panel. This has been incredible. I love the engagement level from online and in the room. And our esteemed panelists, thank you all so much. It is quite incredible to see the outcomes. Thank you, thank you, thank you. I am setting you free now. Now, on to the next part of our program. I would like to hand things over to Mark Belinsky and Cynthia Lowe to walk us through the Digital Development Compass. Mark, I'm doing two things at the same time here. Can you guys hear me okay? Yeah. Fantastic. Mark is an entrepreneur and creative technologist. His work is centered around interaction design between people and the technologies they use to solve large-scale problems. Currently, he is a digital innovation and scaling specialist with UNDP, building global-scale technologies for impact. And Cynthia is is a program manager with a background in project management and process improvement. Currently, she leads the skills-based volunteering program at GitHub. Cynthia sits on the advisory board of Mobile Pathways and Code Savvy. She has experience in leading nonprofit social sector strategy planning, as well as go-to-market and project launches. Mark and Cynthia, over to you.
So much, Tolu, and exciting to be a fifth M to the framework. So it's such an honor to be here in front of all of you to help launch the Digital Development Compass. At the head of COVID, I think we all had a big issue of how do we relate to one another during this time. And UNDP had this issue of how do we do development? And so one of the issues is without digital, there is no development. Without digital, there really wasn't a way for us to do any of this work. And so our partner governments were coming to us and saying, how can we use digital to improve the whole spectrum of development work that we're doing? And so the solution was, how can we provide a very fast way for them to do this development work? And so we created the Digital Development Compass in order to help provide that. A very fast and easy way to speed and make more sustainable the whole development process. And so what we've done is aggregated as many of the quality data sets in the world as we could find to focus on providing that snapshot. So we have around 189 data sets that we've aggregated, which helps to produce around 18,000 rows of actual data that we've parsed and normalized. Normalization is often overlooked and underrated, right? And so one of the issues, for instance, if you have one data set that has Gambia and another data set that has the Gambia, how do you really make sure to leverage this information and make it usable for the entire digital development community? So on the front end, we have this interactive platform. On the back end, we have a system that allows us to share data that we're hoping that all of you will be able to go in and utilize so that you don't have to have any of those normalization headaches yourselves. So we see this as an opportunity for governments to get a better understanding of their own systems and of their own countries so that they can participate more proactively in that digital development work. We see this as a great opportunity for funders to help understand what is the aggregate ecosystem of the entire world and how to do that analysis to start seeing where resources might be spent. And we also see this as a great opportunity for researchers to dive in, use this unique data set, and start to provide some of those insights. There's a great question earlier about, well, what have we found? And I think we're just at the surface of starting to really draw out unique insights and then share back some of those stories on what we have found. Now we'll pass it over to my colleague, Cynthia.
Thank you, Mark. Yeah, I also want to showcase the tool as we're talking about it, because I do want to have everybody able to see what we've been talking about the whole time. So I'm going to take a quick step back and build off on what Mala had mentioned on how we really got to this state. So the projects that we run, we work very closely with Mark and his team to understand what type of problem we can actually solve. So we have our volunteers, our engineers here, who built this, but before this became anything, a blank space, we first worked on a data pipeline. Being able to say, okay, here's all those data pieces, how can we get them to all say essentially the same thing so we can understand and put them into a really easy, there we go, to understand graph. And taking all those data pieces was the first part of that project. After that data pipeline, which I believe we're hoping it is open source, and so this way, in other words, other organizations can take this pipeline and do something similar as well. After that data pipeline is created, then the team created the visualization. And we'll also have Matt come up to do a more interactive demo as well. You can ask him all the technical questions. We also have people online, Amelia Wattenberger, who also created the tool. And you can ask more on the exact questions on each country. So for example, Canada, I'm from Canada. And so we can take a look a little bit more into each section. For example, the data availability. We know for sure on this section, we're highly confident about the availability, whereas other areas, we're not as confident. And this gives you a little bit more insight into each section. And we'd love to hear from you about how we can improve this. But before we get too into that, I'm going to hand it out to Mark to talk even more about the tool.
Great, thank you. So the question is, how does this work? So for one, we have working with great developers from GitHub was really a lot of fun because they make really amazing, interactive, beautiful tools. And so we have this fun globe that we can spin and really choose any country to look at. Behind the scenes, as our Chief Digital Officer, Robert Opp, had mentioned, we are leveraging the digital transformation framework to understand how to analyze each of these countries. So each country is ranked according to stage of digital readiness. So we start from basic to looking at what is transformational. Each of these we score from 1 to 5.99 to start to create that understanding of what the current status is. Right, so investigating each of the elements, we then map the scores to each pillar and then to each subpillar, from cybersecurity to connectivity infrastructure, really trying to hone in on that analysis. And so we have this nice little rainbow that we look at in the visualization where we start to analyze what do those scores look like. We can see where the gaps are, we can see where some of the successes are, we can see where we might need to have a little bit more focus to bring all those levels to a more, to the best place that they can be. So for instance, we can start to see the aggregate scores. And for instance, Ghana has a 2.67 on its own connectivity technology area. This is mapped across definitions for each of the pillars and subpillars across each of the stage. So we can also start to indicate what progress looks like and where a country can go as they make improvements. All of this is, of course, publicly available on the GitHub site. And so you can really dive in there to see the data, the technology, the front end, and how you can build your own platform based on this code. We want to make sure that we're only using the best of the data sets, and we're always asking for more. So there are a lot of ways that you can help. You can help by using the platform. You can help by using the data. You can also help by doing the work and getting more interesting data sets. In particular, inclusivity is often overlooked and at a national level, very hard to get access to. So what are the gender divides for some of these data sets? There's so much opportunity and so much need to draw some of these types of insights. And so we're always looking for that kind of help. And then we're also in peer review, so we want to make sure that the platform is better. We know that there are places where it can be improved. This is the beta, and we ask you to join us and join our advisory group if you want to lend a helping hand.
Great.
And then, as was introduced, we have even other elements to the platform.
Yeah, absolutely. So I believe we're almost at time. I'm going to hand it over to, I believe, to wrap up.
But don't go.
Yeah.
You're handing it to me, but I would love for you to say, that was incredible. Thank you so much for going through that overview of the campus. I'm sure that you all have a lot of questions, those of you in the room and online. We are going to have an interactive session where you'll have the opportunity to talk one-on-one with the engineers. But for now, we'll just take maybe 2 or 3 questions to get us started. So do we have something online? Yes.
Okay. There are 2 questions online, and I guess I'll merge them and address to Mark. So one part of the question is, how do you think the tool will help national governments support the digital transformation at the subnational and local level, which I guess we can look at from the perspective of the depth of the data collection, maybe working with subnational local partners also to ensure that they use this data. And secondly, the other part of the question, just from the same person, have you considered, or is there a part already component of this data which integrates voices of the citizens and measures their digital trust in the ecosystem in various ways? You know, it could be information ecosystem, connectivity, et cetera, et cetera.
Great questions. So I think with this platform, there are certain directions where it needs to go in the future, right? There's sort of a deeper and a wider. This is often a snapshot in time of what development looks like. And this is live. So as soon as the data is updated, this is demonstrated in the platform. So data is updated from our partners basically on a monthly basis. So we'll see improvements over time. In terms of going deeper at the subnational level, what becomes very difficult is there's not as much access to that data. So I think as governments start to open up their data sets, and I'm a native New Yorker, so I will plug New York City. I think they've done an incredible job of opening up hundreds of data sets about the city. And then once that has occurred, there's more ability to do that analysis. And so we very much encourage that kind of transparency and openness, because I think that allows for insights to be drawn out. And then in terms of the people's perspective, that is paramount and fundamental to a lot of this work. And not all of this can be taken from international data sets. And so at UNDP, we've been focused on our own digital transformation efforts, which includes the digital readiness assessment and other work, which allows us to really dive in and partner with a country after we start drawing insights from the more top level to pull in what are the citizen insights, what are the people insights from NGOs and from the realities that they're seeing on the ground to create more comprehensive reports. And I think the minister from Moldova also spoke very elegantly to that work that we had done with them.
Thank you, thank you. Let's take one more question from the room. Go ahead. Oh, a microphone, sorry. There we go. Oh, no, we got you.
Okay. So this is absolutely fantastic music to my ears, and I imagine not just mine. I do have a question about, does this inclusive, I actually wrote this down because it's a long question. Does this inclusive digital transformation and digital compass also include the environmental dimension? And by that, I mean tackling the energy crisis that is caused by using the internet. It's also referred to as the hidden pollution. And in doing so, it would definitely become something that's both for people and planet. And if you manage to reduce the initial requirements for connectivity, you could then boost the inclusion further. So is that included in all of this?
I will say yes and no. I had made an ask earlier, we need more data sets. So I think on the no side, we would love to have more insights because it's a very hard question. On the yes side, I will say that there are some, and it gives us some initial insights. So there is a measure of e-waste that is included in here. But the number of countries that have taken, that the research applies to is still very small. So we also, as UNDP, like to point to the work that our partners are doing and to pull them into the work. And so this is an indication where if our partner government wants to do more research, then we can point them to those that are doing this e-waste research to dive in and do that analysis according to the methodology that our partners are pursuing. But we would love to see more of that because it's really an important question. Thank you.
I think Mala has her homework. Well, thank you for that question. Excellent question, and thank you for the question from online as well. At this point, I invite Guy Paris, the head of technology with the Chief Digital Office of UNDP, to deliver the closing remarks. Guy? Thank you both very much. Thank you.
Thank you, Tolu. As you can see, I have a very long speech prepared. I'm not going to take a lot of time. On behalf of UNDP and the Chief Digital Office, let me first thank all of you for being here. I know it's a very busy Friday just before the General Assembly, and thank you for being here. Also, the online audience, I was told there are many people connecting from different time zones as well, so thank you for staying up, getting up in the morning, and connecting. Also, I would like to thank Microsoft and GitHub for the long-standing partnership that we have, and also providing us with this stunning location for this event. I'm sure all of you will agree to that. And also His Excellency Iurie Țurcanu for the inspiring words. Your Excellency, I apologize for the video feed, but your speech was really inspiring on what Moldova is doing. And also our great panelist, Alex, thank you for being with us here. And I would have to thank Yuping as well. She had to leave early, unfortunately. And Mala, thank you for being here. And Tolu, thank you for being an expert moderator and seeing this event. Also, I have to thank my colleague Mark and Cynthia and Matt and Amelia, who I heard is online as well, for putting this tool together. I'm sure you will agree. There's so much potential in this tool, and that is thanks to the GitHub engineers and the volunteers. And Mala and Cynthia, thank you for giving your best engineers to us. And last but not least, my team here as well, the CDO team is here, and the GitHub team who put this event together, so many sleepless nights, as you can imagine, with the production crew as well. So thank you for that. And to conclude, I would take a quote that I saw at the UNDP Stadium in Turin. I'm sure this is about 100 years old, and it was in Italian, roughly translated to English. Things done well can always be done better. Things done well can always be done better. I'm sure you will agree that we've done well to bring these data sources together, but it can be better, and we want it to be better, and we want your help to be better. In terms of direction of where this tool is going, we want to add the digital public goods into this map to the framework. We want to add the lessons learned from the country, not just the data as well, but we want your help. We want you to come and, like Mark said, come and talk to us. Give us your feedback. Go scrutinize the data. Tell us if there's a better data source out there that can replace an existing one, or if there's a new data source that we should be using. So we want you to come with us in this journey to accelerate digital transformation in countries using data. Thank you, everyone. But before I leave, a few logistical notes as well. There is a very interactive session happening immediately after this, and there is a survey as well. If you could take a picture, use the QR code and give us your feedback on this event, I really appreciate it. Also, there are some light refreshments as well, so please feel free to grab one of them. And B, for the interactive, I'm sure when you saw the tool, I saw some people trying to see what's in those in small print there. So feel free to come up to one of these screens. There will be 2 screens here, and ask questions. Ask some tough questions from Matt as well on the technical side. So thank you very much, everyone.